A big turning point for me and my family was I lost my mom to cancer when I was 13. And my dad, really in response to that, his way of dealing with grief was to take us traveling. A company like a Ripple will be looking for is often going to be very orthogonal and different and sometimes counter to some of the interests of like Bitcoin holders. We helped secure now over 105,000 Bitcoins, $11 billion at today's prices. And that's really in this format of this kind of shared custody, this shared responsibility. Cool way to characterize Unchained is that unlike a Coinbase where they have 10x the assets or whatever, hundreds of billions of Bitcoin and crypto they help secure. I don't know how many keys they have there. Like, say it's a half a dozen keys or a dozen keys inside of Coinbase. But at Unchained, there's tens of thousands of keys that secure the 100,000 plus Bitcoin that are here. Your seed is that's kind of your portal to like real freedom. And so that power, that capability is something like you should really want to preserve for your Bitcoin security and custody.
Hello and welcome from Bitcoin Vegas 2025. I'm Efrat with You're the Voice.
And I'm Ben from Crypto Talks.
And we're here today at a collaboration. We're going to interview a series of guests here in Vegas. And we'll introduce each one of them for you, and then we'll roll with the episodes.
The episodes are going to be released on both You're the Voice and Crypto Talks, so make sure you're subscribed to both. Our next guest is Joseph Kelly. Joe Kelly is the co-founder and CEO of Unchained, a leading Bitcoin financial services company founded in 2016. He is a board member of the Texas Bitcoin Foundation and a serial entrepreneur.
All right, Joe Kelly, thank you so much for agreeing to come and chat with us.
Stoked to be here.
It's amazing. Thank you. So Joe and I met Lugano last year, October, right?
It's a beautiful sunny day.
We took a drive up the hill and saw some amazing places, churches, and beautiful view of Lugano.
Herman Hesse's house.
Exactly. Thank you so much for introducing me to Herman Hesse. I've been reading his book since.
It's great mind.
Yes, and the day trip was awesome.
Good company.
Yeah.
And Joe and I just met. Was amazing.
Yeah, but you've just met a really cool guy.
I can already tell.
All right, so let's jump in, Joe. How did your time in Alaska and living on a sailboat shaped your frontier mentality and approach to business?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think corresponded by my parents. My mom was one of 8. And I think she felt very cloistered or too tight in her family. And so she was from Pittsburgh. So she jet out to Anchorage, in like the 70s kind of a thing. I think that was her way of jetting out. And she was the first and really only of her siblings to kind of go do that and set out on her own. So I think plus a little genes there and some personality in my parents that ended up in Alaska in that time. And my dad was a business owner, had his own business surfacing computers and small networks. And I started with typewriters like that back when, but so I also had some of that entrepreneurship at home, and that the idea of being a business owner wasn't foreign to me.
Yep.
And then a big turning point for me and my family was I lost my mom to cancer when I was 13. And my dad, really in response to that, instead of getting super despondent or just otherwise his way of dealing with grief was to take us traveling. So my
Wow.
younger sister and I, as the 3 of us, we left Alaska in a motorhome, drove to Florida. He bought a sailboat and we moved on to that, and then lived on that for 3 years. So really this kind of choice in the face of, adversity or like a challenging moment as a family that, he really showed me how to make something out of that was special.
Oh, yeah.
And we named the boat Jean after my mom kind of a thing. So it was a cool way. She was always still with us. Yeah. I think just, I'd have an independent mentality. Also that time in the boat and seeing, how many other cultures live.
Yeah.
How the kids go to school differently. Maybe they go to school by dinghy or boat, every morning, or just the things different cultures value differently than we do in the U.S. It really opened me up to just, we're all also human. We're all also, people at the end of the day, same species. But there is so many different settings you can have as a culture and as a person. And some of that is choosable. You can have choice. And so it just made sense to me to look for areas that continue to maximize that choice and don't constrain us unnecessarily, or in ways that are imposed just because some guy or gal way back when thought it was the way it should be. So And yeah, that time on the boat, also being with family and the people I cared about most, showed me I wanted to have some exert control over my time. So being an entrepreneur felt like the path to do that. Again, I think and that's borne out roughly true. I mean, I think sometimes like CEO of venture-backed company, you're not actually really that in control. You have instead of just having one boss, I've got like clients, investors, and many employees kind of a thing. So the reality can be different than what you go seeking, but still, it's a core value of mine, just that freedom.
Amazing. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, amazing story. So over your career, you built several businesses, but eventually you came to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
What made you do that?
Gosh, well, I mean, not too similar for, I think, Efrat's story of your helping her into Bitcoin. So my co-founder of Unchained, Dhruv, he and I were co-founders of a business in the data analytics space from about 2009, 2013. And after we sold that business, he was, oh, Joe, we got to get in Bitcoin, or like this was like the thing for him. And I was like, you're skeptical, or with a lot of the modes of independent thinking, like, let me kind of really like rationalize this. Do I understand it? And I had a lot of questions. And so his technical acumen, his understanding of how it worked, gave me a lot of confidence in just his answers and like how to proceed with it. And then just for that era, that the part of our lives and our journeys, we knew we wanted to partner together again on a business. We work well together, and now partners for over 15 years. And the idea of Unchained, I mean, was essentially like how to serve long-term Bitcoin holders with the products and services they need. So instead of, I think, a way people went about business and still do kind of backwards, like, I don't know about the technology is cool, maybe the blockchain, and so they go try to take that solution in search of a problem. It was just clear to me, I mean, that number one users of the blockchain are Bitcoin holders. Like, so that's where the market is, and that's what people have real needs around, and then people weren't taking it very seriously in 2015 and 16. So we thought also, that's like there's an asymmetry there. There's maybe a contrarian idea to build something on that could be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
You bought Bitcoin in 2013?
Yeah.
Right? What was the core insight that made you believe in the long-term potential of Bitcoin?
Just a mix of things. I think really things that are like robust, or like in a material sense, like concrete. It's mixed up. It's not just concrete. There's rebar in there. There's an engineering. There's just some material science to it that involves multiple things in order to make it the strongest possible. Mm-hmm. And ideas, I think, are kind of like that too. Really robust ideas have like this thing from game theory, or this thing from computer science, or these kind of multiple things happening once that make it a really longer lasting idea. And I think Bitcoin had that at both of those levels. Between Satoshi's own genius was less maybe any one component, but like the way he brought them together, and then they brought it all together, and then so that all kind of that rang true for me. And then back to even the independent idea of just like, wow, gosh, like great investments are things that like 80% of the world is ignoring or disputing or trashing. And so that also had just a high signal quality to me, that it wasn't just something so obviously true to.
And was there a aha moment, like a moment in your conversations with your co-founder that you said, now I get it? Or was it like
mix of things? I mean, even between in that 2013 and 14 timeframe, I think it was still true. Just that like the amount of compute and energy going into Bitcoin mining already well eclipsed the data centers Microsoft or Google run, or what we know of any government runs. And so just that actually like a really robust like kind of networker idea, that like the core thing, keeping a 51% attack or any kind of co-opting of the network at that level is so prevented by something so fundamental as energy use and these deployments of computers that like, that just sounds really, really solid.
Amazing.
You're the Voice is brought to you by Trezor, the original Bitcoin hardware wallet company pioneering the development of self-custody for crypto assets since 2013, empowering individuals with an open source device, enabling beginners and experts to easily and securely hold their coins. I find my Trezor super easy to use and recommend it to my friends and family. Enjoy my 5% discount on Trezor products by clicking the link in the show notes and using the code FLAT. And what you're saying about the concrete type of idea that is constructed out of multiple like polymathy, multiple areas.
Yeah.
Thanks to reading your biography this morning, I learned a new term called complex science. I didn't know that. That's
Complexity science.
Yeah, complexity science, like a science area that brings together complex systems analysis. This is a beautiful term.
Yeah.
Complexity science.
That's how I met Drew. He was at UT in Austin getting his PhD in physics, and he was in the Department of Studies, just the Center for Nonlinear Dynamics, or complexity theory, chaos theory, that kind of a thing. So, it was my passion or curiosity about those that sparked our friendship early, and it's fascinating.
It is.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that people use the technology in order to find solutions to a problem that they create. That's really connected to the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. And you once said that Bitcoin is a signal while crypto is a noise. How do you see really the relationship between Bitcoin and crypto? What are the risks you see by combining them together?
Yeah. At a couple levels, that the things that provide those the security guarantees in Bitcoin, or that robustness to it, don't exist elsewhere. And so it's easy. There's just some bias or fallacy when things kind of do get lumped together, that the quality we talk about Bitcoin having, or we imbue in Bitcoin, then people kind of smear that over these other things that don't have it. And so, and it's reasonable. Most people are busy, have lives. We use heuristics and shortcuts in thinking to lump things together. And so it's that categorization kind of bias that led people to want to group all these things together in a like for like sense. And so but then you lose something in that process. So you kind of, you've confused things. And so whether that happens either on a technological level, because they are very different, whether it happens in a business and business model, what happens in what are you buying and what are you selling to somebody, and even government and politics, especially where it shows up a lot more recently in just the kind of arena of things that a company like a Ripple will be looking for is often going to be very orthogonal and different, and sometimes counter to some of the interests of Bitcoin holders, people in our community.
If there is one cryptocurrency that I dislike, it's Ripple. So thanks for mentioning that one.
I'm sorry, the trigger word.
Yeah. Now we're going to get the army again.
Yes. Oh, God.
They're always on top of my Twitter.
Yes. That's getting bad about it. Just there's
no, I was
not aligned. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So let's switch to Unchained. What does Unchained Capital do, and what led you to start it?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about it. It's just that idea of, hey, myself and my co-founder identified as long-term Bitcoin holders. What do we need? What kind of products are available to us? We come through the experience of having sold our prior business. You kind of get these people like wealth management companies like Goldman Sachs. They reach out to you. They find your name after those announcements, and we're like, there's, at least in America and worldwide, there's now this new class of wealthy that are holding Bitcoin. So they need things too, and it's unlikely that they're going to get the level of service and the quality of product that they would want out of a traditional financial institution. And that came from thinking about it both as a technology still, and so that they're going to want capabilities that recognize the sovereign self-custody type features of Bitcoin that it enables. So that was always there in the beginning for us, of having a multi-signature based platform. We since called it collaborative custody, because we're really collaborating with our clients in the custody of their Bitcoin. And that's really the backbone of what we do. We help secure now over 105,000 Bitcoins, $11 billion at today's prices. And that's really in this format of this kind of shared custody, this shared responsibility. Cool way to characterize Unchained is that unlike a Coinbase, where they have 10x the assets, or whatever, hundreds of billions of Bitcoin and crypto they help secure. I don't know how many keys they have there, how that infrastructure works. It's obviously very well guarded, and they have to do a good job securing it. But say it's a half a dozen keys or a dozen keys inside of Coinbase. Who knows how it exactly works if you're outside of there. But at Unchained, there's tens of thousands of keys that secure the 100,000 plus Bitcoin that are here. So it's really leveraging a more centralized company or a U.S. financial institution. There's this decentralized backbone and this kind of shared reliance on each other with our clients that I think is really cool. It also enables certain capabilities that are native to Bitcoin. Like if you are truly self-custodying, then you can move your Bitcoin without intermediary. There's no one that needs to be involved or, and that experience is something, we're keenly interested in preserving for clients wherever possible. But imagine that and people do when they talk about being an Unchained client, it's like, oh, I store my Bitcoin with Unchained. And this was like, there's the words, it's kind of, it's like that makes sense that they are still the holding two of the three keys. So they have this kind of majority sovereign control. But unlike a bank or a financial institution, there's this like sovereign recovery backdoor. Like when clients initialize a vault with us and create an account, they get their what's called a wallet configuration file or a thing they can back up with that and their two keys. They can use any open source wallet that supports Multisig, and they can move the Bitcoin on their own to another address or service provider or wherever they'd like to. And so, there's a balance on these things. It's that tension between, with that great power and freedom comes some responsibility, or like the clients do need to maintain their key material and safe in a safe manner. But that's also what we're there to help with. So we provide a lot of education and like hand holding and white glove services to give people the peace of mind that like, oh yeah, I did it right. It's in the right place, pick the right locations, and
so important.
Once and twice a year, they go through a key check process with us to really revalidate or reinsure that those keys are where they meant them to be and that they're accessible and usable. And for many of our clients, this is their like the biggest asset in their household, something they want to pass on to their kids and future generations. And so that's then a part of, again, really this kind of merging, or we consider kind of integration of Bitcoin into our financial lives and into our livelihoods, where you want your will, your estate plan, or however that is acknowledging where assets are supposed to go. You'd like your Bitcoin to be kind of included in that or be rationalized within that. But if your spouse or the person inheriting your Bitcoin doesn't know where it is, or and you were self-custodying, that can be a problem. So Unchained's sort of there to play a role. We can't affect the transfer unilaterally ourselves, but as long as the estate, has a way that like one of the keys is accessible, able to be accessed, then we can cooperate with the heirs and others to move it. So there's just a great blend of the technology, the Bitcoin, the promise of it, and it requires this kind of new breed of financial institution because there's a legal system. There's a society we all operate in. They need the licenses to do this. We need to be able to be trusted by people that trust things with licenses. And it's a role that like from a government and just a legal titling point of view, like we want people with estate plans that include asset transfers, including assets with Unchained, that to be like legally, have like the right I's dotted and T's crossed kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I'm squeezing in one follow-up question. So since the company is now running for a few years, and one of the things you do is help your customers deal with their heirs, and if there's someone who passed away and they want to give it to kids, did you already accumulate quite a few cases where you had to escort families through that process, and was it successful? Like, because this is relatively new for all of us. It's only a 15 years industry, and so we're bumping into those use cases for the first times, right, in the last few years. So
I'd say one of our busiest teams, and where we add a lot of value is really what we kind of consider our fraud and risk team, which also covers some of the estate type issues. Yeah, and we actually built like a nice guide on our website that's really born out of all the experience we've had. And it's unfortunately only within the first few years of it. I think by our third year operating, I think we even had like a loan client pass away kind of a thing. So now it's dealing with his estate and the borrower, the liability to the company, but also the collateral, the Bitcoin that was there. And so there was a process to work with, I think the attorneys and heirs in that scenario to kind of wind that out. We see divorces, we see, breakups, disputes, we see death and those kinds of issues. So we're kind of.
So you're becoming experienced in all those use cases now?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So over the years, there's been an evolution in different key management solutions, right? So we have like multi-party computation now and hardware security models, yet you still use Multisig, which some would say is considered like old tech. I have my own opposition to that, but I want to hear, why do you still use Multisig? Why do you see multi-signature as like the core for your business.
And shared custody is a much better name than Multisig.
Yeah.
Well, as a marketeer, right?
Yes.
For normies, it's much better.
It is where you want to speak to the solution.
Yeah.
Than the technical capability. I mean, on a couple fronts, I mean, like we're talking about, robustness, things that endure, things that are really solid. As at least where in this area of technology, cryptography, and security, you like the things that are tried and true and tested, or have been, have had every bright hacker in the world try to take it out over the last decade, kind of a thing. And Multisig has something like that going for it, and its various natives in Bitcoin. We actually take a slight detour. We had a detour as a business for a while at Unchained, where we supported Ethereum in the early days.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, well, in fact, 2018 through 19, we supported Ethereum as loan collateral. It was a good experience. I think also just in a way of like learning by doing, or learning by actually like being involved in the technology. It was the nodes were very flaky. It was a pain to keep up. Or also, multi-sig security was done through a smart contract layer, not like something more embedded in the protocol. And so that created real security risks. Many of the larger like hacks that came out of the Ethereum ecosystem were these kind of smart contract failures. And so it was these people kind of rolling their own or doing something new, versus maybe utilizing something at like more of a base level that is very, very strong and robust. So we did back out of Ethereum for some of those technical reasons. Also, just wasn't a good business for us. It's very, very small in terms of its impact overall. And so it's kind of fun to watch more of the market now rotate back into being Bitcoin only when I guess we've been that since 2019. I'm not the lead technologist by any means of the company, so I can't give every point on the answer for why multisig over some of these other things. At least for our kind of use case, and I think for clients, one nice part about multisig and how it works with Bitcoin is you can go to one location, create a signature there, and then just take the signature with you, or have uploaded it to Unchained, keep all your key material and everything there, and go to the other location and use your key there. Use the other key in that spot and create a signature there. So you get to maintain that physical separation at all times of all the key material. Or some of these other approaches, you're kind of rematerializing the whole key at one spot and one time. And so all that entails in terms of a single point of failure kind of thing gets to happen in that moment. And that's how I think even like some of the exchange hacks and things that have occurred in the last few years happen because that process was thwarted internal to the company. And often people are going outside of multisig for cross-asset support or supporting multiple cryptocurrencies, where if you're just Bitcoin only, you get the benefits of multisig.
Tired of feeling like your freedom and future are fading away? Do you live in a country with growing inflation, crazy housing prices, weird culture, and a chaotic economy? You're not alone, and my friend Mikkel Thorpe and his team at Expat Money can help. Mikkel is the world's leading expat consultant on a mission to free you from broken systems. He's been an expat for 25 years, lived in 9 different countries, and has helped hundreds of people with second residencies and passports, offshore banking, international investing, and many other essential tools. If you're serious about protecting your wealth and your family, it's not enough to hope things will get better. You need a plan B in another country. The team at Expat Money can help you build it legally, safely, and without wasting years of research. Visit expatmoney.com/efrat and leave your details for a follow-up. In a world hypnotized and sleepwalking towards totalitarian control and digital enforcement, awakened voices rise to inspire change and radiate hope. In December 2024, I had the honor of hosting Professor Matthias Desmet at a conference I produced called New Totalitarian Order. This masterclass is now recorded and available to watch. The conference explores the psychology behind global mass processes, offering a behind-the-scenes look at science, economics, and human potential. It addresses challenging global agendas, mass formation, transhumanism, consciousness, societal change, and the path to transformation. Click the link in the show notes to access 3.5 hours of exclusive presentations, in-depth content, and my fireside chat with Professor Desmet. Use my code EFRAT for 10% off. I hope you find great value in it. So speaking of Bitcoin only, what does it mean to be a Bitcoin native financial institution? And is it different from traditional finance with a Bitcoin product?
Great question. I think there's a lot. I think
because we're gonna start to see more and more traditional finance with a Bitcoin product.
Yeah.
And you are Bitcoin native. So I want you to make the distinction between.
Yeah. Well, I think in a lot of ways, I think Bitcoin native, there's a way you would see, and it'd be uncontroversial probably say that there's an ideology behind Bitcoin, an ideology like a point of view or an assertion of things that whether it's between privacy or an individual's control or ability to move their asset without intermediary, and something to the tune of keeping central banks out of the ability to inflate the money supply. So all these things are kind of orbiting around the idea of what is Bitcoin, or what are kind of Bitcoin native values. And so as a company, we think about those things. We think about that in realm of privacy. We collect the minimal information we're required to. And sometimes that minimal information is also helpful in the same inheritance scenarios we're talking about, where there's a legal process about assets into transfer. And so we kind of, know who you are and who the person is asking for the assets and what things say in the paperwork kind of thing. But we don't share excess data with marketers. We don't, we're very careful with how we take care and protect that data. So respecting privacy is just kind of a core value to the product. That sovereignty that comes in with the key ownership, respecting keys, just that where you can allow the client to hold a key or hold a majority of keys, control their assets. You do that. And then finally, in respecting the finite monetary supply, that's just this idea that once it's gone, it's gone. So then you also really got to respect the security. So you need to architect things well to not let people lose their Bitcoin. And that's where I think you saw. I think this other way I've thought about it is the world of financial services we have today is this family tree that goes back thousands of years to the early. I think predate early times when gold and coinage kind of came around in those years, and then you had that then you had banks that kind of showed up, and you had maybe bonds or longer term kind of financial instruments over time. The insurance industry starts to show up 500, 600 years ago, but all these kind of were built on these successive layers of assumptions about where money comes from, and that it's inflatable, or it comes from these kinds of these sovereign nations. Bitcoin, it's kind of my argument is its own family tree. It comes out of this truly new, this hyper modern thing that couldn't have existed before. It does require computers, it requires a networked society, and it requires the people that can use it and cooperate with it. And so there's a way that I view the kind of Bitcoin native family tree as just getting started, or just this new asset and this new form of product. And there's going to be crossbreeding. There is already kind of insurance solutions for this, but that leverage fiat monsters like a Lloyd's of London, products like a Bitcoin-backed loan. This was the first product we started with that's also taking trusting Bitcoin as collateral, and treating it as a pristine collateral that you also don't want to rehypothecate. That's another kind of very probably oriented practice. And so keeping a lot of collateral where it needs to be, but then getting US dollars. And so I've been a great adventure over the last 8 or 9 years at Unchained, also learning how credit markets work and how that whole capital markets machine works, because it's been very slow. Often most conservative investors are credit investors. And so Bitcoin sounds absolutely no, it's something they want to touch. Even though a company like Unchained has a clean track record of no loan losses kind of a thing in this space. So, I think that's sort of something like the high level answer with some practicalities of just what a Bitcoin native, product is. It's respecting those things. And I think that's what led to a lot of the, losses and pain out of this last cycle, and even the last 2 cycles, were people rushing in being, let's just do what we did in traditional fiat and financial services. Let's gather the client assets. Let's rehypothecate them out so we can pocket money. Maybe the clients get some benefits too, or at least advertise benefits. But then when there's not the kind of market or structure or asset class that can support that kind of lending, it took out BlockFi, Celsius, FTX, you name it.
That's definitely leading us to the next question.
Right.
So where's
Mini follow-up one.
Of course.
Does that mean that Unchained is or will be subject to the same legislation or regulation that traditional finance institutions will be when the new legislation comes in? What do you think?
We in certain
We're a different entity in terms of
we already are subject to a lot of the same regulations. Just by nature of the whether it's
money
transmission, yes, and that's the buy-sell activity between Bitcoin and US dollars.
Yeah.
Lending requires money licenses in certain states.
Okay.
We just created a trust company in the state of Wyoming so that can perform additional fiduciary services for clients. Mm-hmm. But still a lot of the activities we talked about, like with rehab application, those are a choice. Those are business choice that the business makes.
Right.
And you did have, and I'm not an expert. There's others certainly about like what more full reserve bank models
Yep.
like compared to fractional reserve banking, which is the only model we have really in the financial system in the U.S. today. So,
except for Caitlin.
I know, except for her. Yes, but that's something I'm hinting at. People know more about it than me for sure. And I'm rooting for them, but it's clear. It's like part of their challenges is because of like the way it's done
crazy
everywhere else.
Yeah.
So, we're not subject to the same incentives, I guess is my answer.
Got it.
But regulations, like, yes.
Yeah.
But they don't all mandate it. Because we're not a bank, at least we're not forced into a fractional reserve model.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're seeing a big wave of companies that are offering Bitcoin lending products right now. And to me, it does feel like the same vibes, even though I know it's different of FTX and BlockFi and Babel Finance, and I can go on with all the names.
Yeah.
And
sorry?
the great guy. Yeah. And the question I want to ask is, how do we prevent this next boom and bust cycle of very disappointed investors that put their Bitcoins, their precious Bitcoins, with a company and they did fractional reserve it and hypothecated it and lended it over what they could? What are the risk management policies that investors should be looking for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do think there's a lot of risk to certain things repeating. However, because the last cycle, it only feels like it was only like 2 years ago, right? 2 or 3 years ago that those firms went under. So it's like not that far. So it's still kind of in collective memories. And I think the operators of a lot of the businesses doing that now today are like new entrants. They're appreciating that there were some wrong ways to go about things. So a lot of them are advertising either like no re-op application or just like there were not. It's the Bitcoin won't be lent out kind of a thing. So that is arguably safer. That's a better market structure for this than what happened back then was like you just had one fund basically borrowing all the Bitcoin from all these different platforms, and so it was all going to the same kind of black hole that just took it out. So I do think it'll be a long time, decades perhaps, before there's at least something of a robust lending market in Bitcoin. So some people are lending up and like interest rates, set and priced in Bitcoin for Bitcoin loans to each other. There's still always, again, just the massive just custodial risk and like kind of infrastructure risk. So I think that's why my prediction there will be on a much longer horizon is just because how to exchange Bitcoin with each other in a large and robust complex market. Like it's going to take time before you don't have the kind of centralized contagion or like single domino that knocks them all down like you've had. So there, but yeah, so I think that's I'm just observing. I think people are getting smarter. They're maturing into it. I think that the things to look out for is continue to be just high risky LTVs. I think just flashy marketing. It's just a loan. It doesn't need to be super exciting. Just be practical. You know where you're going to get, who it's coming from, and and I think like a place to watch or just. There's a good report from Galaxy about the overall lending ecosystem in the space, and just I think watching I'd be watching over time. So for us as both an institution and like with the partners we work with, I don't think it always matters as an individual borrower, but like the percentage of loans outstanding to kind of market cap as that's just a proxy for how much leverage is there in the system. Mm-hmm. There's according to that report, like less than $10 billion out against Bitcoin across platforms and providers. And this is from a couple months ago. And I bet it's still probably less than 10. And I think the peak in the last cycle was like 40. So, we're still well under the previous cycle's peak, also the higher market cap. And still, it's just, what is that debt? What is that? That's a big potential sell wall someday if like there are these kind of margin call scenarios and stuff like that. So that's just the kind of risk we live with in the space.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see U.S. regulation evolving for Bitcoin, and where do you think it's headed in the next few years?
Gosh, I think I have a couple. Yeah, my history with regulations has often been that this is an area where especially the kind of crypto narrative really hurts, or like that kind of getting drug into that as either an asset class or like the kind of big tent argument. I'm usually a big tenter and so like the human being or like trust, allow people to have their beliefs. But at the margin of trying to convince policymakers, legislators and stuff like that, I really have over time always wanted to throw out a lot of like where people's agendas seem to be set. And I don't know why or how they always got that way. I think for Unchained, our first biggest practical concern, when we showed up in the scene in 2015 or 16, Bitcoin was already a commodity. There was already enough kind of clarity about you needed money transmission licenses to do buy sell. None of that's changed. There wasn't a lot that was like necessarily additionally there from a regulations point of view, but one of the most useful things, but also kind of least known things about Bitcoin and especially the secured lending, like lending against Bitcoin has this great property that we know where it is on the blockchain and an address, so we know how to physically move it. It kind of mirrors the same like inheritance problem. Like, well, so-and-so may have left it entitled to their spouse, and so that the spouse can physically move themselves. But what if like their will actually assign some general idea about their assets to a son, and then but that wasn't clear about how the Bitcoin goes. So that's where that lack of legal clarity now creates uncertainty or stress or tension in the family or something like that doesn't map how easily the Bitcoin could have transferred just because the spouse knew where the keys were. And Bitcoin lending, it's kind of, Ben posted some Bitcoin as collateral, Unchained lends against it. Ben defaults somehow on the loan, we want to claim it. Oh, but maybe Ben had also declared bankruptcy, or there's some other creditors in the mix, or there's some way that like another creditor, even though our loan agreement said it should be our collateral, another creditor, somebody argues, no, that's due to that. So it's kind of, lack of clarity can create friction in lending. When you want to be the lender, you want to be very assured of what's yours and what's whose.
It has to be priced into the risk, right?
And so it becomes priced into the risk, or like, or people just won't touch it. And that was a lot of our early challenges. And raising capital in the space is that like this kind of concern about what is called secure transactions and like securing the collateral and there's a framework in the U.S. It's called the Uniform Commercial Code, which is adopted on a state by state level of how these kinds of contracts tend to be read, or like if I'm lending to you, what my contract needs to say about the collateral, or what things I might need to file in order for that to be like in any scenario, any judge, just black and white. That's like me as the lenders. So this is just a very practical concern for me. It's like starting a lending business, wanting this clarity about how Bitcoin is treated under these kinds of frameworks. And it wasn't until I think like 2019 or 2020 when there's a Uniform Law Commission in DC that basically created a standard, like Article 21. I think they got, it could have been 12, I can't remember, but like they created the standard. But now it's a state by state adoption process, and probably I think less than 10 states have brought this in. And so it's this esoteric thing, but it's of such practical concern. And so there's a lot of ways, again, I think there's, and like what I just love to see is like a huge war chest of funding for lobbying groups in every state to like go help get this added to each state's UCC. It just creates more legal certainty, more clarity, more good market structure for firms to participate in. Cause that's one of my pet hobbies, or like is thinking about that corner of things. I think otherwise, just keeping them out. I mean, I think the way that the banking system was with the Operation Choke Point 2.0, like there was this really bad element at work there. So I think ways over this administration we can build up something more of a moat around the prevention of that kind of thing happening, and like this industry being unduly targeted and prevented from basic banking services. I think I think some of that will be inevitable as there are more public companies. There's just more private companies too, but just like more of this embedded voter base and client base in the country. That will be like a vocal majority, hopefully someday, to speak out against things. Because I don't think Bitcoin needs very many more like victories. I think it just needs to sort of still be protected, have some of the basics protected.
For sure. So I myself am a CEO of a company that is alive for 7 years, which means that I also had ups and downs. Yeah. And you've been open in the past about mistakes you made during bull markets. What can you share about like going through that period, like scaling in bull markets, doing it responsibly, your takes as a businessman, essentially, in the space?
Yeah. I think, if I were to give myself advice or others, it's like, try to do more with less always. I think we've had the privilege and benefit of being venture backed. And I think while I've not gone too far in excess in hiring, I think it also could make us lazier sometimes. Instead of like take an extra month to automate something, we kind of move on to the next thing and leave a person in charge of some manual work for that. So I think that's on a trade-off basis, looked like the best decision at the time, but it's hard to know how quickly the market's going to turn. And I liken, I think being a Bitcoin startup, company, it's kind of like two roller coasters at once. It's like an amplification of the highs and the lows of what just a normal startup would have, in almost any forget. But Bitcoin just has this extra kind of quality to
amplification.
It. So yes, you just gotta have a tough stomach for the ride, and I think that things like finding community. I think wherever I feel lost, I just like connecting with good people.
Yeah.
In the space. So it's a good reminder of why we do what we do.
For sure.
So going back just before we wrap up to your personal perspective, you're a private pilot, right?
Yeah.
But amazing. And a fan of complexity science, like we just mentioned before. How do these things intersect, if they intersect at all, or influence how you think about Bitcoin and systems design?
Great question. To the intersection there that I'm thinking of comes from risk and decision making. I think one of the things I learned in becoming a pilot was the distinction between kind of those elements you can control and you can't control. And they teach you that the number one pilot killer is something called get there-itis, which is hit the right. Like, oh, it's the weather's bad. I remember there's a lot of clouds. Maybe there's an incoming storm, but if we don't leave now, we're gonna miss the wedding. Or like that. Like we got to get there. And it sort of is confusing the practical consideration of like whether to fly or not. It's a safety issue. It's a physical. It's a like how are you like feeling and are you capable? But also like is the weather system, is the plane mechanically, or is all that like the physical systems there kind of cooperating? Has nothing to do with your schedule or your calendar or social promises or commitments or that kind of a thing. And so it was a nice kind of training to sort of try to like separate those out inside of myself, like what is of concern for this decision versus what is not of concern. And that can show up in a lot of different areas of business and otherwise. But I think, just like trying to evaluate the right chunk or part of the problem with what tools you have versus like all of it, which may have some not so relevant parts.
Cool.
Yeah. What's the biggest misconception people still have about Bitcoin?
Whether it's technical and just like, where the Bitcoin actually is. I think as well, it's hard. I don't know if I'll wade into this one. We the value of seed backups versus there's kind of there's like a narrative where like people like want even like this recent services that do some cloud custody things are like no we don't want seeded backups. Like that adds like extra complexity or extra friction, and what we've learned, I'm onboarding thousands of people in self-custody and even watching the market, as some people are previously seedless now come back to recommending seeds, is like your seed is that's kind of your portal to like real freedom, like from harbor mall manufacturer, from any kind of service like that. That seed phrase is the kind of fundamental like root of these things.
Yeah.
And so that power, that capability is something like you should really want to preserve for your Bitcoin security and custody. Versus that shit, like just because it's a little harder, just like relying on next level, like just the hardware wallet manufacturers, or just like some other setup. At that point, maybe just full custody, somewhere, find the right custody setup for you, and not doing self custody. But that probably real self custody involves maintaining seed backups.
Yeah,
one I could see a lot.
I like that.
All right, and Joe, as we wrap up, this is my favorite question: is what gives you hope? Where do you draw hope from?
People like you, Efrat. People that bring people like you into the space. It's just that, the real clients we have at Unchained, I think that's, again, part of the privilege. And even to the misconception comment, is just like, there's real people, doctors, lawyers, moms, grandmas, like, that are saving in Bitcoin, have saved in Bitcoin, are saving Bitcoin through their businesses, and that they're onboarding to places like Unchained every day. And that's just cool to see. And it's a real responsibility we feel, because it's also now like it's real people, real people's money. It's not just some crazies from 2010 or something like that are now millionaires and billionaires. It's just like everyday savers and people. And so
it's a very humbling experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
To know that people put their trust in Bitcoin and in your company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
It is.
Well,
thank you very much.
Yeah, on that note, thank you so much for being with us, and good luck at the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Please take a minute to give this episode a like, a comment, and subscribe or follow. And please share it with your friends so they can also get value and choose to take some positive action in their lives. Till next time.